Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 32 for January 13th, 2017. Hey everybody, Daniel Rubino joined again by Zach Bowden for another episode of the Windows Central Podcast where we will cover this week's news. And as we head into 2017, it's getting too long to say. Not a whole lot going on, and yet some pretty big things this week. We'll be covering the new Windows Insider build that went out, Windows 10, 1502, and is it 1502 and 1507, along with game mode. We're going to talk about the Surface Studio, my review that will be out early next week, but by the time this goes live, you guys will be listening to it. Opera Neon and my YubiKey stuff. Zach, how are you doing this week?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
It's Friday, so I'm always excited about that. Getting ready for my UFC fight, which is on Sunday. I'm not actually fighting, but I'll be watching. So, it's always good like that. But yeah, let's jump into the Windows 10 Insider builds that we got this week. There were some interesting things that happened. First, there was 1502 came out, but only for PC. Then some build accidentally came out for mobile that some people installed. And then for some reason last night we all got 1507.
Right.
So tell us what these are, what's in them, why should we care, and are we impressed?
So build 15002 was pretty much identical to the leak we had over Christmas, build 14997. So it includes the new things such as the improvements to tabs in Microsoft Edge, being able to set tabs aside, as well as improvements to the settings app, such as having that sidebar on the right now, reorganized categories in some areas, jump lists for Edge. Let's see else. Live tiles in the start menu with the new share UI, although there were some interesting things here as well. So in 15002 there was an improved high DPI support. Now this is quite spectacular if you use a device that has a high resolution and is using Windows 10 at a high DPI. This wouldn't affect you normally if you're just using a normal 1080p monitor or whatever, but if you're using, say, a 4K monitor, you're most likely using it with some form of DPI scaling. And beforehand, a lot of old Win32 apps would look pretty bad on these high-end displays, but Microsoft has improved this now, made old-school apps actually scale much better than they used to. So this is a fantastic change for those of you who are using high-quality screens. And smooth window resizing, this is one I'm very excited about. So you may not have noticed it before if you're running the anniversary update or any previous version of Windows thinking about it. If you resize a window, you may notice a bunch of tearing within the actual window itself. This has been an issue for literally decades at this point, and Microsoft has finally fixed it with the Creators Update. So resizing Windows now feels a lot more like it does on Mac, which is a compliment, not an insult this time around. It's very nice. It's just nice seeing Microsoft make these small improvements here, there, and everywhere to the UI, because for a long time now, Windows 10 has kind of felt rough around the edges when it comes to its UI, and it's just nice to see them focusing on these little things, because it does mean that they're actually starting to take their user interface seriously. And that's a great thing, because I think UI is a very important part of software. Not many people agree, that's fine, but I'm definitely in the camp of UIs are great. So I'm very happy to see that. Then, of course, we have the new out-of-box experience, which is powered by Cortana. Microsoft says that they're still working to improve this. They'll be adding support for privacy options and whatnot later down the line before the Creators Update comes out. So insiders should see it within the next few builds. And a bunch of other smaller stuff. Now, this build didn't come out for mobile 15002, so it had been, when this build came out, it had been over 40 days since the last Windows 10 mobile build was released.
You weren't counting, were you?
No, I wasn't. I made it, just worked it out right there and then. So it was a long time, and many people were upset at Microsoft. So much so, apparently somebody at Microsoft, I don't know how this happened. I think they said that they were testing something and it accidentally targeted an external group of people. But build 14998 for mobile started showing up at, I think it was late where Redmond is. So it started showing up for some people.
It was super early.
Oh, was it super early? It was. Yeah. It was a bad time for it, pretty much. It was an unusual time where not everybody would have been up at Microsoft or at Microsoft to actually push it out. So it showed up under a different tag called localization for English. So this didn't actually show up as a build itself. It just looked like, an update for a language pack. If you actually installed this, however, it would install build 14998. There were worries at first that this build would actually cause issues of updating to future builds. Turns out that's not the case, because the day after, Microsoft announced build 15,007 for both PC and mobile. And that build's basically identical to the one released for PC previously. A lot of the changelogs that they threw into a lot of the changes they threw into the changelog for PC were in the previous build as well. But for mobile, there are some improvements, including Windows Hello becoming faster. Now, this is something I wrote about a few days ago. Microsoft has cut out one of the animations that made Windows Hello feel super slow. Now, Microsoft are going to bring the animation back, or so they say. They're just going to make it so the animation no longer delays the lock screen from disappearing once it authenticates you as a user. So if you haven't used Windows Hello on a Lumia 950 or whatever, when it scans your face, it says looking for you, making sure it's you, then it says hello, your name. So in my case, it would say hello, Zach, and then the little icon would give you a wink, and then it would slide the lock screen up. They're changing it so it no longer says hello, your name, but they're going to bring that back just without it delaying the lock screen, or at least that's what they want it to do. Regardless, it's a lot faster now, and I think Dan can say this as well. It's so much better. It just feels much more quicker now.
Yeah, no, it's been it's definitely an improved experience, and I'm kind of excited that they're going to bring back that winking animation. It's superfluous in a lot of ways, but these are the little delights I think that people take in an operating system.
Right.
So it's kind of nice that they're still going to work that back in there without because it was a little bit slow. Depending if you're using iris or fingerprint, it's not the quickest experience, but it definitely feels a little bit zippier now. Granted, it's a year later following the original release of Windows Hello. And that should be coming out of, I didn't even check in this build if it's out of beta. I know they've talked about taking it out of beta pretty soon, for at least for iris scanning. It's been out of beta, I believe, for facial scanning for a while now.
Yeah, another feature in this build, pick up where you left off. Now, this is something I wrote about months ago at this point. But basically what this allows you to do, as Microsoft says it, if you have multiple PCs, you probably know how cumbersome it is. It can be to find everything you need to resume work after switching between PCs. Cortana can now help with that. When you switch computers, Cortana will display quick links in the Action Center to help you easily get back into Microsoft Edge websites and SharePoint or other cloud-based documents you used most recently. For example, if you're working at a PowerPoint deck on your laptop, when you later return to your desktop, a link to that deck will appear in the Action Center. So basically what this is like is the OS X continuity feature, just a little bit more basic for Windows. So what you do is you're working on a document on your, I guess it's not working for phone yet because they only mention PCs, which is interesting. So you've got a laptop running Windows 10, you're working on a Word document, 5,000 Word document. You can open another PC, have it in the Action Center. Cortana will say, hey, I can see that you've been working on this Word document. Would you like to continue where you left off? Or in this case, pick up where you left off. You select it, opens up Word, continues you exactly where you were on the other machine. And it's just a seamless transition between devices. And again, this is one of those smaller things that just makes sense for a one-core operating system. Just having computers talk to each other makes a lot of sense. And we should point out
that this is actually an option available to developers today for usage in their apps. So apps like Read It already do this, where you can be on your phone browsing your favorite Reddit and have a thread that you're reading, and you can basically send it to another PC. And when you basically open the app, it'll just open right to that spot, which is kind of cool if you're, say, reading a big article on your phone and you're like, oh, actually, I want to finish this on the PC. You can just open Experience there. There's a few other apps that basically leverage this technology and ability, and it's definitely something that's slowly coming online. But what makes, I guess, this interesting with this build is, and you pointed out this criticism before, that Microsoft themselves hadn't leveraged their own technology and their first-party apps and systems yet. And now we're starting to see the initial rollout of that with this update. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited to see it finally show up because I read about it ages ago and people were like, are you sure this is still coming? I was like, yes, I promise. It will show up and it's fine. Because it does. A lot of the things, I've said this before, Microsoft has lots of things in the plans. They start working on something and they save it for later. It just happens all the time. It's just great to see a lot of the stuff that they had planned a couple years ago finally showing up. It's really quite exciting. And that's pretty much it for mobile and PC. So the build that came out for mobile wasn't exactly, oh, look at all these new features like the 15,002 build was for PC. there's a noticeable lack of focus on mobile right now. We know that there's continual improvements up and coming, but we don't even know if they're coming in Redstone 2 at this point. Microsoft did say when they announced the continual improvements that they would be coming in a future update for Windows. They never specifically said Redstone 2. So we don't know what's going on.
And I think that's sort of the what makes this both interesting and frustrating for users. And I kind of get it. I mean, Microsoft doesn't want to go out there and go list, give a whole thing of bullet points of like new features that will be coming in the creators update when they can't necessarily deliver on all those because the plans change, some things get cut at the last minute, so there's some flexibility there. And we have like the big banner features, which they've of course announced at their October event, but there's nothing really there for mobile in terms of like what we know is coming. So even this build this week had a lot of like little surprises in it when it comes to like Edge and the scaling abilities and, some other little changes. I noticed Cortana on desktop seems faster. We always kind of joke about that, but it actually does kind of refresh and keeps, if it's not refreshing the data, it just pops up a lot more quickly now. And so there's a lot of small usability improvements that aren't documented that people are picking up on, but it's true for mobile. We don't know. It doesn't feel like a significant change yet. Sure, the Windows Hello thing is kind of a big deal, but in terms of using Fast Ring, at least on my Elite X3 for that release, it doesn't feel like a big improvement. And Zach and I were kind of talking about this before the podcast started about basically the issues people have with Windows 10 Mobile as is today still don't feel like it's necessarily being addressed with these latest releases. That's not to say that the goal for a Creators Update is not going to address that, and we won't see significant improvements coming in these builds. But so far, if I had to, like, when I pick up my Fast Ring, I have two Elite X3s. I have a Fast Ring and I have Production. When I pick them up, they don't feel dramatically different. I don't, for a while, I would always go for, like, for instance, when Groove was going under some big changes and they're adding a lot of features, I'd always go for my Fast Ring phone because I liked using those features that weren't available yet in production. And we haven't really seen those app features yet, right? So part of the way the Insider program works is not only does the OS bring new core features, but the Microsoft can update its first-party apps, which also enable specific features and specific rings. And we haven't really seen that lately. So there's like nothing new in Groove, for instance. There's nothing new with MSN News or weather. And, some of these did come out earlier. Over the last few months, they did bring improvements to those apps. And then they went both to Production and the Fast Ring. But it doesn't really feel too big of a change compared to at least the anniversary update. I'm still hoping that changes, but like I can't be like, oh, Windows 10 Mobile anniversary update was good, but wait till you see the creators update, how much better things are for mobile. It doesn't really feel like that yet. We don't know if that's because it's a lack of focus. Those features are still just coming and we're just being a little premature here because we're all in the dark. We don't know what actually is coming out until Microsoft goes, oh, hey, there's this feature here. And some things are weird, like the EPUB stuff and Edge. It's like, okay, that's nice. Not exactly a feature I think most of us were asking for. One thing that was kind of interesting in the PC build is the ability to have the downloads basically have like a download, and a notification to have like a download bar or something like that as a progress indicator. And so developers are going to be able to basically put in a lot more features into notifications. And that's not yet there on mobile, and it's not clear it will be because I guess there are somewhat different systems. So again, this seems to be mostly a PC-focused release, which on one hand, it's not a surprise. 90% of the PC market is still Windows, and that is where the bread and butter is. They got to Surface Studio with Creators Update that people are going to be expecting. So not a huge surprise that they're going to go where all their partners are, HP, Lenovo, Dell, releasing new devices. They want to make sure this OS is top-notch there. Whereas mobile, no one knows what's going on there. It's just like the Lumia series is run out. We keep hearing stories that they're not being sold anymore. The Elite X3 is still not a viable option for consumers. So it's Yeah, it's definitely an odd situation.
I think Microsoft have kind of fallen into this grey area of, right, we've got Windows 10 for ARM, which we can run on phones if we really wanted to. And at the same time, we've already got a Windows 10 edition that runs on Windows phones, but it's not popular. It's like they're in this sort of weird area, because what they could just essentially do is they could build Windows 10 for ARM, then build a composable shell that scales down, throw Windows 10 on ARM onto phones. I know I'm being very basic about it. It would be much more complicated than this, but stay with me.
Sure.
Bring it onto phones, and then they can just say, well, Windows 10's on, I don't know, almost 1 billion devices at this point, and that includes phones. When a developer targets Windows 10, they are targeting phones regardless in that case. Whereas right now, a developer can target Windows 10 desktop, and even though their app is universal, it doesn't necessarily have to run on phones. With Windows 10 on ARM being a full Windows 10, if you're targeting Windows 10, you're targeting those ARM devices as well. And that way, phones would get more apps and whatever else. So it is quite interesting. I think they don't even know what they want to do now. I think they are just still sort of like, should we continue focusing on Windows 10 Mobile, or should we just focus on bringing Windows 10 on ARM to mobile devices? I think that's where they are.
Yeah.
Or maybe maybe they know what the answer is and they just won't tell anybody because the answer is bad news for us right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think they do have a plan, but again, like what we said earlier, we're just not privy to it. So yeah, the whole Windows 10 on ARM thing is sort of this weird situation where it's not going to be even out for presumably a few more months at least until, Snapdragon 835 and newer chipsets come out. So, is that their mobile strategy going forward? We don't know. I've articulated a position that Windows 10 on ARM could be positioned as their sort of pro mobile device for high-end sort of phones that also act as full computers when you tie into Continuum. That's a guess on my part, where then Windows 10 Mobile, as we know it today, falls into this lower SKU for cheaper devices that can go in the $200 to $300 range that run a subset of apps, not full desktop abilities. It has Continuum, but not the full Continuum with Win32 abilities. And so all that, we don't know how all this is going to, shake out. It doesn't help that, market share data came out this week. None of it surprising that, it's at less than 1% now, I mean, and if you think about it, with Windows Phone as a whole is only like 1% to 2% maybe of the world market share for smartphone devices. And then out of that, something like, I forgot what the numbers are now, 25% are only Windows 10, because everybody's still mostly on Windows Phone 8. Like, it's a really small group of people who are actually part of the Windows 10 mobile group. And so, I'm sure that doesn't go, well, let's, refocus everything onto Windows 10 mobile right now, especially since we're not selling actually any really new devices with it.
So this is the other thing that I'm thinking about. So you say that there's no market share. That doesn't really give Microsoft an incentive to continue focusing efforts on Windows 10 Mobile when they just have Windows 10 ARM and can throw that onto phones. If you think about it, it makes less sense for them to develop both. I know Dan has the idea of that it will be a low-end model, which would make sense, but it also wouldn't make sense for Microsoft to continue developing it if it's being used by 0.5% of the mobile market, where you can also have Windows 10 ARM, which just looks like Windows 10 Mobile and essentially is Windows 10 Mobile, but much more better in every way, run on new devices. Now, the problem with that, however, is you leave the 0.5% behind, because Windows 10 on ARM will not be coming to Windows 10 mobile devices that are currently on the market because they just can't support it. What happens then? I can't wait for all the headlines. Microsoft resets Windows Phone once again. Oh, damn it.
Well, I think they would still, this falls into that concept that whatever they release isn't a phone. This is always weird, right? It's a phone. It can still make calls. Terry Myerson has articulated why they keep Windows 10 Mobile around, which is because of ARM support as well as telephony, the ability to make actual phone calls. So that will still be a piece of it. And that's actually what's missing right now in Windows 10 proper. Windows 10 actually doesn't make phone calls, and that whole stack, that whole part of it that's in mobile is not part of Windows 10. So that whole thing needs to be somehow merged into Windows 10 proper so that we can have devices that can basically act as a desktop PC or a laptop or some sort of portable tablet that can then also make calls using eSIM technology. And so the question is that what they're doing? And yeah, we don't know. If they do that, they can get away from this whole like phone trap, because no matter what they do, they can't directly compete with Android or iOS on, in the same sense that this is a smartphone. But you're really starting to see, I would say, in the media now, people are really kind of conceptually getting tired of iPhones and Androids. Sure, it's still part of the news cycle. There are new devices coming, but you can tell there's a fatigue coming in where people are going, okay, better displays, slightly better cameras, it's a little bit faster, battery life is a little bit longer, but what else is there? And people are seeing less reason to upgrade their phones. And now we're coming up, we're on the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, and it's finally starting to hit people that like, okay, now what? It is what I've been saying for a long time. It's like, okay, but what next? Like, if you tell me in 10 years we're still using an iPhone 15 and it's just the same device, it's just thinner, better, like that's really missing how technology is evolving today. There's so many more technologies coming out, including, the graphene battery stuff, foldable displays, there's holographic, there's AR, so when you start bringing all that stuff into the mix, what does a mobile device look like in the future? And that's still where I think Microsoft is building towards. And I think in this case, they may actually, it may actually be a smart decision, because like I said, where currently smartphones is just not very interesting. We're in a very much a stasis right now where people are or companies are just building products and iterating on them, but they're not really pushing any boundaries. And I think that's what really needs to come next.
I think what we need as well is for developers to take the universal platform seriously, because we do have a fair share of universal apps now. Let's not lie here. We have Twitter. We've got pretty hefty Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger apps, which are basically the iPhone port. So they're pretty much fully featured all the time. But we've the likes of Twitter and a number of other first-party from the developer apps, if you get what I mean. They're not exactly perfect. The Twitter app has more issues than I can begin to count. If the biggest issue that I am constantly suffering with, it doesn't do notifications. The notification.
What?
It doesn't do for mentions. It does it for DMs, but not mentions. But only some.
I get it for mentions.
I get it for mentions as well, but only sometimes. Only sometimes.
See, I actually really like the Twitter app. My only issue is it occasionally crashes.
No, don't get me wrong. It looks nice, but then there's also other things, such as I don't think it works on Windows Phone, but on iOS and Android, you can be in another app and somebody will post a Twitter link, or there's a Twitter link in that app. You select it, it goes straight into the Twitter app and opens that tweet within the Twitter app. I don't think that happens on Windows Phone. And I'm thinking that might be more because of the universal Windows platform just doesn't have that API yet.
Well, and that's the biggest problem right now with UWP. Even like Microsoft hasn't fully embraced UWP yet. Some people have criticized them for not putting all their newer things into UWP. But part of it is because people need to realize UWP wasn't a one-time thing. It's like, oh, it's out. Where is everybody? It's a complete platform, and they got to build it out. They got to write the APIs. They got to develop tools for it, and that's an ongoing process. It's just like Swift language support for Apple, where it's going to take builds to get there and add functionality. So there's no way UWP is as powerful as Win32 today. It's just not. The goal is to make it that, but it's going to take time to get there. And in the meantime, Microsoft, is just kind of biding time and, waiting for our stuff to get built out.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to currently iPhones and Android devices, they just work. Whereas Windows 10 Mobile and I guess Windows devices in general, they do just work, but not all the time. Especially when Windows 10 Mobile users will know the most. Windows 10 Mobile doesn't just work. There's always something that it doesn't support or a thing it can't do that it should be able to do. Like here in the UK, if you're a Windows 10 Mobile user, you can't use your phone to pay for things, whereas in America you can. I know that's more of a regional issue. In theory, yeah.
Unless you're using the Elite X3, which doesn't support it. Yeah.
But on an iPhone, you can use Apple Pay in pretty much, I guess, wherever it's sold. It's like, things just work.
And I still don't use it.
Yeah,
right. But I know what you're saying. Sure.
Things just work, and people, normal people, pick up an iPhone and know what it can do. Whereas if they pick up a Windows 10 mobile device, they will constantly be hit with, oh, I can't do that on here. Oh, this doesn't do this there. It's a little bit frustrating. And I don't think, although Windows 10 on ARM coming to phones would be fantastic, I don't think that will solve it until developers start taking the platform seriously, which they will, of course, if Windows 10 hits 1 billion, whenever that happens.
And there's also this other lingering issue, which that companies are realizing now, which is that the app thing is not the panacea that everybody thought it would be. That basically now there's app fatigue setting in where companies are not getting their return in investment. So when you make an app, you have to hire at least a developer, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 developers, and those cost between $50,000 and $70,000 a year, depending on how good they are. And then you got to maintain the app. So there's the initial investment, and then there's the upkeep of it. A little bit easier for iOS in the sense that they just target the iPhone. A little bit more difficult with Android, but they have to at least do both of them. And what's happening now is companies are taking into consideration how many people actually use the app versus your service. And we see this on our own website with our app, which is a pretty good app. We haven't updated it in a while, and we will be doing that soon. But part of the reason is, if I actually showed you the numbers of the users who come to our site versus the ones who use our free app, it's minuscule. There's barely an argument there for some of these services. And while it's nice, we do the app mostly as a reward for our core audience who do come to the site every day and want to use it. But even take Android Central, who at least for mobile stuff is bigger than Windows Central. And there's obviously way more Android devices out there. Their app usage is also not significant. And that's kind of weird. You think, well, you have an Android phone, it has all the apps out there. You install the Android Central app, but people just don't do that. And a lot of it has also to do with the fact that people get news now from Facebook and other feeds where the news gets, brought to them as opposed to going out and using a specific app. So there's a lot changing in mobile. Consumers haven't caught up to it necessarily yet. I think the industry is. The more I read in the tech media, and I'm not even talking about the niche kind of thing, I'm talking about the more meta tech media, it's finally starting to resonate with them that where we are right now with apps and where we are with mobile, it's okay, it's a mature system, and that's fine, that's good. But that's not how technology works. We don't stay with mature for very long. It's always okay, so what comes next? And I think this is what Microsoft's trying to answer and build for. But, there's still definitely a lot of room here for improvement, that's for sure.
So long story short, we have no idea if Windows 10 Mobile is going to be around for much longer.
Anyway, but yeah, so a lot of room for improvement. I think it would makes sense for Microsoft, and we've talked about this before at Build later in May, for them to come out and basically give a hint as to their mobile strategy, even if it's just teasing later this year, early in 2018 or something like that, we'll talk more. They just need to do something like that, because right now it's sort of, and it's weird because they're doing so well otherwise, and that's the one hole in their game. If you look at where Apple is right now, I'm reading so much more negative stuff about Apple these days, and some of it's unfair. I think a lot of it is sort of well, they're kind of the most popular guy in the room, so anytime there's a minor blemish, they people want to jump on it and be like, oh, that's the end. But some of it's probably true too. I think, when it comes to Apple, their other problem is that whole era of innovation under Steve Jobs seems to have ended. And I don't think that's hyperbolic. I think that's actually kind of true. And, companies go through these periods. And Microsoft, on the other hand, seems to be having sort of a renaissance with their Surface stuff. Even the Xbox One S has been, both in terms of design and functionality, has been a bigger hit than I ever thought it would be. Not that I had doubts in it. I'm just surprised how not good Sony is doing with its PlayStation 4 by comparison. So, I don't know. They need to do something here soon. But
I just want to clarify quickly. I was only joking about the Windows 10 Mobile comment. Windows 10 Mobile will continue to exist, but just we're expecting it to evolve into Windows 10 on ARM at some point.
Yeah, this whole idea of bringing these systems together and reducing
Right.
overlap is
One Windows, right?
Yeah.
One actual Windows. Because right now there's technically 3 Windows: Xbox, desktop, and then there's Windows Phone. And I guess technically HoloLens, although I consider the HoloLens and Windows 10 mobile operating systems to be relatively similar. So there's technically three.
I was going to
main
say,
ones.
in this new build, right, there is the one that's holographic stuff under settings
and there's
now,
also,
which is
if
kinda
you look
cool.
in the system files, there's a bunch of Xbox assets and whatnot. So it looks like, from at least from this perspective, it looks like they are bringing in everything from the Xbox OS, everything from the HoloLens stuff, and I assume that they will be bringing the phone stuff in if they haven't already. And then they'll just say, right, well, this is Windows. You install it here, it works there. If you install it there, it works there. And that would make the most sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, from a development perspective, it's a lot easier for them to reduce overlap between these operating systems as much as possible. And so they just have to develop one system going forward. And that's not something that gets accomplished and it's done and that's it. No, this is an ongoing project. It's going to take, I think, a couple of years, but they've made a lot of progress so far. The actual, as we know, one core was finished. Now it's, going more to the shell stuff and other components, but it's, they're still positioning themselves for, I think, an interesting future where the desktop PC is not necessarily, and already isn't, the focus, right? It's going to be other types of devices, but...
Speaking of the one-core subsystem and universal platforms, Microsoft today announced a game mode. Their up and coming under-the-hood improvement that will make games run a lot better on Windows 10 PCs and, I believe, Xbox One. Now, we've heard about game mode for a little while now. It started showing up in system files a while ago, and we kind of, I believe it was us that wrote about it first, saying, oh, game mode is this thing. It's an under-the-hood change that will allow Windows to make the game, it's on PC at least, to position the game as the most important thing happening on the machine right now. So it will take resources from other areas in the system and push them towards the game, making it run better overall. Now, this will work with Win32 games and UWP games, which is where it's beneficial on Xbox One as well. And not only that, they've also announced that they're bringing Beam to Windows 10 and Xbox One, which again is something we knew. They've just announced today that it will be coming to Windows Insiders shortly, and it will work through the game bar. So you press the Windows key and G, then you press the Beam streaming, and then on Xbox I assume it will be similar to how you stream to Twitch on Xbox. So if it's a voice command, it's hey Xbox, whatever it is, stream to Twitch. In this case, it'll be streamed to Beam, and I'm sure there will be a UI for it as well. Then in regards to the increasing performance in gaming with game mode, Microsoft says, with the creators update, we're introducing a new feature called game mode. Windows Insiders will start seeing some of the visual elements for game mode this week, with the feature being fully operational in build shortly thereafter. Our vision is for game mode to optimize your Windows 10 PC for increased performance in gaming. This is a big update for Windows. We're looking forward to Insiders getting their hands on this new feature for further testing, and we'll have much more to share on what it is and how it works soon, so stay tuned. Now, we will have, I believe Jez is working on an article that details game mode in more detail. I'm not entirely sure that's gone up with the announcement that came out of Microsoft's, or if he's going to have it in a separate post. Stay tuned to Windows Central for that. But game mode, as we basically just said, it positions the app and makes so the system takes resources from other areas and throws it towards the game, making it run much better.
Which is smart, right? Because as PCs have evolved, they basically multitask and run a lot of services in the background. And there are third-party apps that already kind of do this. Razer has one themselves where it basically shuts off stuff in the background. Obviously, you don't want to be doing a Windows update while playing Gears of War 4 against in Horde mode. So, that's a meta, huge example. But then there's a lot smaller things, including notifications. You don't want a Twitter notification coming in or things running in the background. So the ability to suspend services and maximize output, I think, is pretty important. And it seems like to us like a small thing, but I think that's actually a really big move for Microsoft. And I'm not surprised, but I'm glad they're doing this because, I'm not surprised because they've really refocused on gaming these last few years and have decided, all right, let's take this Xbox thing and let's bring it to our other systems and do it right. And I'm a huge fan of Play Anywhere and UWP gaming stuff. Like I've talked about this before. I hate running Steam. Like Steam to me is this completely clunky system. Now, kudos to Steam for doing it, in the first place. No one else did, and they built a really big empire off of it. But it's still a messy thing to have to run this service in the background. It checks for updates. Itself needs to update. Then it needs to update your games. It's just like, I want everything through the store, where I just launch a store, just updates.
We are in the minority, by the way, when we say that. We want it through. All PC gamers will kill us if we say we want it through the Windows Store, because I think a lot of PC gamers right now are still kind of like wary of Microsoft's plan with the Universal Platform and the Windows Store.
Yeah.
But because it's just so much more convenient. It's the same reason why if we were to leave Windows Phone, we'd go to iPhone, because Android is just clunky. It's just everywhere. iPhone, it just works.
Yeah. No, and Microsoft obviously needs to make that case. Although I'm thinking more for the general audience, kind of person, as opposed to, the specific gaming community, which is important, and they spend a lot of money, no doubt about it. But just like our coverage in general of Windows, we try to cater to the the hardcore nerds who really want every detail about Windows 10. But I also want to talk to the person who's just like a 45-year-old dad who's like, hey, I got a new PC. How do I do this, right? And so I'm sure Microsoft wants to do the same thing with gaming, because games are important. They're big these days, and but why? You want to reduce the barriers for them, for people for getting into it. So.
Mm-hmm. Microsoft also announced up and coming in, I guess, the Creators Update. Every Xbox One will see an update coming to the guide that will make it faster to complete common tasks. Through one press of the Xbox button on your controller, you'll be able to pull up the newly enhanced guide as an overlay on the left side of your screen, no matter what you're doing. In addition, we're rebuilding most of the popular multitasking experiences for speed and ease of access. For example, you'll be able to start recording your game DVR clips, adjust your record length, and access your captures directly in the guide. We'll also have new achievement tracking overlay, gamerscore leaderboard, and Cortana design, and controls for background music, making these features easier to use. Now, Jez actually had a scoop on this a while ago. He basically detailed that Microsoft were currently testing a new guide, a new dashboard with a small subset of testers using Xbox, and that guide had a one-click guide, which was much faster and overlaid things, and they also had the improvements to multitasking as well. So this is great to see Microsoft actually bringing this to the audience, because I believe Microsoft saw our article and they also saw the good reaction people had to it. So everybody read it, was like, yes, I want these improvements, these make sense. And I believe that's kind of part of the reason why Microsoft's like, okay, so here we are announcing it, and it will be coming very soon. So that's very exciting. I, for one, can't wait for the one-click guide. If you've ever used an Xbox 360, the guide was one click there, and it just works. It's super fast. The guide on Xbox One is a clunky mess. It's slow. It's just horrible to use.
It's getting better, but yeah, I agree. There's still some... This is the issue, getting back to UWP, that Microsoft faces, which is it's nice to have universal apps, but there are so many different modalities of input that just vary. How you use... there are a few apps now on Xbox One, actually more than a few. People, like my Ecobee Remote. If you haven't read my review, the Ecobee Remote app, which is a third-party Ecobee smart thermostat application, it's actually better than the official app because it uses APIs that the official app doesn't use, so it can actually do more. That app now is available on Xbox One, and it's kind of cool to use, but it's not quite the same as me launching an app on my phone or a laptop, because it just feels differently. And getting around that, I'm still a little questionable about how we're going to use apps on our TV kind of thing for small quick tasks, which might be easier on your smartphone. But, basically making a UI that adapts to all, to something with a touchscreen, something without a touchscreen, to using a Xbox One controller versus a keyboard and a mouse. These are not trivial. And this is the criticism, by the way, why Apple says they won't do a touch version of OS X, that they've tried it before. And, you can't make an OS that does basically all that works for touch, that also works for mouse, that works for keyboard. For them, they said they tried it and it just was not a good experience. Now, Microsoft is obviously disagrees with that and trying very hard to get around it, but that is, the challenge basically, and it's not trivial. So,
I mean, it's very interesting to see where each of the companies are taking their visions of the future of tech and whatever else. Microsoft seems to be everything can be one. Apple kind of aren't budging from here's a laptop, here's a phone, here's an iPad. And I don't know what Google are doing. They're just nuts. Google are crazy.
Right.
Google are crazy. But yeah, that's pretty much game mode and the Xbox announcements in a nutshell. I was pretty surprised to see those announcements today, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of came out of nowhere. But Yeah, that just goes to show there's a lot of stuff, in this update that just hasn't been formally announced or even formalized in terms of public perception of what we know what's coming. And hopefully over next few weeks should be pretty interesting. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more of that coming.
Microsoft are becoming very sort of messy when it comes to announcements and setting out goals. The Insider program, a lot of the time we're testing things we don't even know we're testing because Microsoft aren't ready to announce the stuff. And it's like, I actually have a few problems with the Insider program right now that I will probably try and write up at some point. It's just Microsoft are doing, although they're doing a lot right, they're also doing a few things wrong, and these few things are kind of substantial, especially with the Insider program. So stay tuned to Windows Central for my editorial on that.
You know what my favorite feature of the build so far for Windows 10, at least on PC, it's the ability to hide the app list.
Yeah, that's mine as well. I like that.
It just looks so much cleaner and better. Like it's one of those features. Like it's sort of like the notification improvements that came with the anniversary update. It was so good that I'm like tempted to install it on other devices because I have 2 versions of my Surface Book, and it's just like that for me. That's sort of like one of those really nice changes.
The best thing about it is where if you look at the details, when you have the apps list removed, the actual start menu lines up perfectly with the edge of the Cortana search bar.
Right.
And it's like, yes, this is it. This is the small UI things that I love to pay attention to.
Right.
I just love it. I just love small improvements like that.
Well, we'll see. Still lots to go on, so we'll be covering that. Let's talk about, I guess, quickly Surface Studio. As we're recording this live, the review hasn't gone up, but it should be going up early next week, which is the same time this will get reposted. So, I've been using Surface Studio for a while now. It's a mixed bag. I'm actually a little bit harsher on it than I thought I'd be, and that's partially it's kind of weird. Microsoft sought to make a device very specific for artists and engineers and architects that who need to draw on a display, and I think for them it's a really good device. The problem is they kind of made it too good, and so there are a lot of people now who see it, and like almost everyone I show this thing to, they're like, "Oh, I want that." And then, they realize they don't need it because of the drawing stuff. Even I don't draw at all. And so the question is, it's like, okay, so what else can you do with this? Can this be like a standard PC for you? Can this be a gaming PC? And yeah, you can use it as a normal PC, and that's how I've been using it. And it's really nice. I love it's because of the display. The display is so good that it basically overshadows all the rest of the flaws of this device. The thing is, if I had to tell you go spend $4,200 on a PC, oh my God, I could tell you to build like an amazing rig with a really nice display that will allow you to do all sorts of things in the future for the next 3 to 4 years easily. I can't even come close to telling you that with the Surface Studio. And there's just so many limitations. So the display is phenomenal, and that's why it's so good. It's just a gorgeous display. I love using it. I love the Windows Hello camera on it too. And the camera quality is fantastic. The audio is really good. And it just looks great. But the actual PC is so disappointing. And I'm speaking from more of a tech enthusiast type. I think for average people who just want to use this as a computer, you'll be fine with it. But if you're spending $4,000 or even the $3,000 on it, it's just not a good investment.
At that point, I think it becomes much like how a lot of normal people buy MacBooks because it's the sort of the message you're sending more than I need this for this, this, and this. It's like, oh yeah, I'm an Apple user. I have the latest iPhone and the latest MacBook Pro and all that. Yeah, sure. I think if you're a normal person buying a Surface Studio, that's the only reason why you would buy it outside of unless you're an artist or whatever, that the product is specifically designed for.
Yeah, and that's the tough sell because it's like it's such a cool device that everybody kind of wants it. And I get it. It's expensive and not everybody can afford it. And that's totally fine. But so when I see it, I like to do gaming on this. And you can. I can play Gears of War on it and it's fine, but at 28 inches, you start to notice the fact that it's obviously running at a lower resolution and, the anti-aliasing has been cut back and, they did a really good job with Gears as an example for adjusting to different hardware. So Gears runs beautifully on a Surface Book too, but you're on like a 14-inch display, so you don't visually, see everything, the flaws as much. When you're at 28 inches, though, it's like, oh, okay, I can really see how it doesn't look as smooth. And that's where it's weird because, okay, let's talk about the hardware. You have, first of all, 3 different SKUs, and you can't configure these SKUs, so they're just prefabbed. You just pick the one you want and want to pay for, and that's it. There's a Core i5, and then there's 2 Core i7s. The 2 Core i7s are the same type. All those are all 45-watt chips, which, if you don't know, those are the same chips found in basically high-end performant laptops. So like the Dell XPS 15 has 45-watt chips. Apple MacBook Pros tend to use a 45 watts for the 15-inch ones. But that's not a 65-watt chip, or, of course, it's not the 91-watt chip that's found with the K series, which you can overclock. So you're not getting the fastest processor out there. That means also its base rate for performance and its turbo peak are not nearly as high, too. So, my current CPU is a 6700 Core i7. So it can go up to, I think it's 4.5 gigahertz for turbo and 4 gigahertz for base. And it's like 3.5 and 4 for the one in the studio. So it's kind of a weird thing. So even the CPU is not like desktop class. It's a high-end laptop processor, which is weird when you're talking about a $4,000 PC.
You're paying for that display.
Yeah, and that's where it's coming out to display. What really gets me, though, is the storage, because it uses the Intel Rapid Hybrid Drive system, which is a fancy way of saying it's an SSD/hard disk drive hybrid. And so the OS lives on the SSD with some room to spare, and then there's the hard disk, which you use for mass storage. Again, that varies depending on the SKU. So I think it's 64 gig and then 128 gig SSD and all that kind of stuff. And you can swap out the SSD. We'll do a tutorial on that soon. It's not easy. If you read my tutorial this week about swapping out the Razer Blade, it's like on some laptops, switching out the SSD is basically like changing RAM. It's just you literally take out a screw, it slides out, you slide in the SSD, and you just go. The hardest part about that is like transferring your OS over. That's the technical part. With this, it's different because you got to disable the rapid hybrid drive and the OS, and it's just clunky. So why they didn't just use SSD, I don't know. I kind of get the processor thing. They have thermal constraints they got to consider. They had some cost constraints and size constraints that they had to deal with. Okay, so fine. SSD though, like there's no case where a rapid hybrid drive system is smaller than a performant SSD. Just, because you're going to have that physical hard drive in there. Like, that thing is not small. It's big. Why not just put a 2 terabyte or 1 terabyte SSD?
Price?
Possibly, but if you're going to tell me to buy a $4,000 PC, why are we haggling over a couple $100? Yeah. You already got me considering a $4,000 PC.
If you're gonna spend $4,000, you're probably gonna spend $4,200.
Exactly. We're just haggling over like minute price differences. You already got me in the door, So
yeah.
At the very least, I would have liked to have seen that option, at least as a SKU choice,
You can upgrade it though, right?
You can, but like I said, It's not easy. We're going to do a tutorial on it. I've already seen some other people have done some instructions on it. It's like a project, Whereas swapping out my SSD in a laptop, like the Dells or Razer, it's like I said, the hardest part is like, how do I transfer my OS? That's the biggest question. That's easy. And then the GPU stuff gets weird too. So there you have 2 GPU choices, like you had 2 CPU choices, but they don't overlap necessarily. So there's a 965M for 2 of the SKUs, and then a 980M for the top SKU, which is weird. So and then you have 2 gigabytes of video memory versus 4 gigabytes in a 980. Now, both of these are M GPUs, which means, again, they're laptop GPUs putting into a desktop system. Now, when you look at the studio, like for designers, for architects and engineers, I think it's fine. I think what Microsoft did, it's fine. For them, it's an okay system. And that's really what they were designing it for. It just feels weird to spend $4,000 on, such a limited GPU. And especially now we know, obviously NVIDIA has their Pascal series, the 10 series, basically that's out there. The 1050 is now coming out, which is basically the equivalent to a 970. I don't know. It feels weird to have these sort of limitations. Again, they were dealing with timing. They built around the 965 and around the 980. I get that. But it just seems like I just wish they could have put something a little bit better in there. And then you got the ports. It's got 4 USB 3.0 ports. Okay, that's fine. That's nice. You have an SD card reader on the back. I kind of get that. It looks cleaner. But now it's just weird if I want to put an SD card and I have to reach behind the system. It's not hard. It's just, I'm not sure Apple would have done that, And so, but there's no USB Type-C, which is strange. Why not have a full Thunderbolt 3 port on there? We know Type-C is like the future. It's a ubiquitous port. You can use it for all sorts of things. This doesn't have it. So it's kind of strange. So there's just a lot of weird limitations at the actual PC part. And it's just, I kind of get it. For its target audience, I think what they did was technically fine. The problem is this thing is so cool and it's so nice that the intended audience is a lot bigger than what, and this is actually reflected in sales. The early reports about sales for this thing have been way better than they anticipated. So that's good. It just could have been so much better,
So you're saying that you will be sending your Surface Studio to me?
Yeah, I see some of the comments. People are like, so all I hear is that Dan doesn't want the studio. And I should tell you, I'm using the mid-range one, although I do have a high-end one coming too. So I'll be benchmarking those against each other to show the differences. That mostly comes down to the GPU, although again, RAM too. There's 8, 16, and 32 gigabyte options. So I just find some of this could have been ameliorated if you, like Dell, if I go and I want an XPS 15, I can go and pick the components I want. Yeah, I'll take a full HD display. No, I'll take 16 gigs of RAM. No, I'll take 32. You can kind of pick and choose those things. This you can't, So
I'm getting, you hate it, but you're getting 2 more.
Yeah. No, it's just I think they'll really improve upon it in the second generation. It's a victim of its own success, and that's a compliment. I think they went into this with a specific niche. They didn't want to create a PC that everybody would want and sell to, because then they don't want to necessarily beat out Dell and HP doing their own thing. They want to leave those guys room to, improve upon this. But, because you can't upgrade this thing as much as you'd want to, you can't replace the processor, you can't, improve the RAM, the storage is a project, it's a weird thing. So it's a great device. I'm just not sure. I feel like it's kind of like what Apple did recently with the MacBook Pro, which is they've created a really nice device, but they've purposely limited the audience by design choices that they made. Where, if I could tell you this thing has a really good GPU in it and a really good desktop processor, gamers would buy it. Not all of them. Some of them would, though, So, I don't know. And you can't even use the display as a dummy display. So say you want, you just have a high-end PC or you want to build your own, but you just want the awesome display. You can't even use that. So there's no input to it. Just output, So I don't know. It's both amazing and frustrating. I enjoy using it as a normal PC. I would obviously never tell you to go buy it for $4,000 just for that function. And not being an artist, it's a little bit harder for me to be
I guess that explains why that they only sent it out to specific outlets to review at first, because they needed to get the message out that this isn't for me or you. This is for somebody who has a pen and knows how to draw a picture or video edits, or just needs that screen for whatever kind of project. It's not for, us who sit at a computer do writing, because we can do that on any computer. We can do that on a $150 Chromebook, technically. Not that we would enjoy the experience, but it's still something that we would be able to use it for. It's just for a much more smaller audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a terrible device, because it's not. It's a fantastic machine that I'm sure everybody would have. If they could have one, they would have one.
Right. And so, yeah, it's just it's both, like I said, a victim of its own success, but it's also a victim of timing. It came out at a time where, NVIDIA's new GPUs are way better than people kind of anticipated. We've sort of went from this 965M thing where M designated like mobile GPUs, which were significantly different from the desktop counterparts. They got rid of that basically, and now there's like, you're putting basically desktop class GPUs into laptops with the 10 series. And that's and it's turned out to be like pretty significant, right? And that's just something that this device misses. And normally I wouldn't think that's a big deal, but if you're going to spend this much money, it's just, this is always the trade-off with all the ones. I just feel like the trade-off here is more significant than in traditional all-in-ones. And it's it's a shame. Like, I think more people would buy this thing if it, they could get it, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, it's still only available in the US, so even if I wanted one, I couldn't have one.
Yeah. But they'll learn from this. They'll improve. You look at Surface 1 and Surface 2, those devices, the Pros, had some pretty big limitations. And once they hit Surface Pro 3, they hit their stride. I would say this is a little bit different. I think this feels way more mature and already solid for a version 1.0 product, but there's definitely room for improvement, and that's fine. They'll learn from it. They're not taking huge risks here, because they're not like, oh, it's at Best Buy, it's in Target, we've created thousands of these and they're already built, so we have to sell them. Like, that's not where they are, so the risk for them is very minimal here. And I think they did a lot of smart stuff. I just wish you could do more. But it's great for pinball.
Oh.
If you play, you have $4,000, you want to play pinball, and it's fantastic.
It's good for running Notepad.
Yes.
.exe. Should we talk about Opera, or shall we skip to YubiKey? Because we're almost at an hour.
Yeah. Let's go to YubiKey. That's fine.
Okay. Well, that's you.
Okay. So YubiKey I thought this was interesting. I've been using YubiKey for years. I use it mostly with LastPass, although I switched recently to NPass. But what I liked about YubiKey, if you don't know, it's a tiny little device that goes on your keychain, and they make a nano one that's even smaller. It's almost too small in my opinion, but it's a companion device that you insert into your laptop or PC. And the idea here is pretty simple. It's a two-factor authentication system. So say I blurted out in the air right now my LastPass ID and password. You could then go and try to get all my passwords, except you wouldn't, because you would need this physical device to insert into a computer, and then you put your finger on it and it generates this code, and it's associated with my account. Unless you have that device, you couldn't get into my LastPass. And that's kind of a neat thing to have. It's a really secure authentication system, especially for, something like LastPass is weird, right? Because you're like, I'm going to take all my passwords and I'll secure it with a single password. Like, that sounds counterintuitively as a secure system. But when you add in two-factor authentication with a physical device that you actually need to have, it actually makes sense. So that's how I was using it. What they did, though, was they announced that you can now use that device basically with Windows Hello. There's a Universal Windows app you can download. It's only for PC right now, but the idea is you set it up, it associates and links with your and Siri just went off for some reason. But you can basically associate it with Windows Hello. It ties to your account, just locally though, just on that one PC, so it doesn't work across all your devices. You need to set it up on each one. And the idea here is when you stick it into the USB port, the computer won't lock anymore. So it'll have like the lock screen, but you can just dismiss it. And as long as that key is in there, it's like a physical key. It's like if I gave you a key to a car, you can now unlock my door and drive away with my car. Think of the same thing. It's just a physical key that goes into the computer. You can now unlock it and use it. And that's kind of neat for a lot of situations where, like in enterprise or schools, where they want to give students or someone access to a computer, but they don't want to necessarily give them the password to that computer, right? You just want to be like, okay, yeah, go use that, $4,000 or $10,000 Surface Hub by sticking this key into it, but we're not going to give you the password because you could do all sorts of damage then. And it's also good for people who don't have facial recognition or an iris scanner or anything like that on a PC or fingerprint reader. For instance, my Razer Blade, of course, doesn't have Windows Hello, but I can now stick this thing into it and just basically keep my device unlocked. It's not nearly as convenient as a fingerprint reader, but it's part of this what they're called companion devices. They're not biometric, so it's not associated with your finger, your eye, or face, but it does act as a secondary device. We'll see more of these coming out. Conceptually, the idea here is things like smartwatches, maybe someday Fitbits, they have NFC built into them or Bluetooth. As you approach the PC, it just unlocks the PC. That acts as the key. I think there's a lot of neat opportunities here for this stuff. We're just starting out, though, down that path. But, eventually your smartphone will be able to do it, too. Samsung actually did this with their Galaxy Tab tablet that came out. It worked with Android, ironically, but you could use the fingerprint reader on a Samsung phone to unlock your Samsung PC. I thought that was kind of cool. So definitely a neat way to rethink about security. But if you already have a YubiKey, you can basically use that now for this. If you don't, you can buy one for $40 or $50 and use it for both things. You can use it for Windows Hello. We can also use it for, it's not just LastPass, there's a few other apps out there, including Google, that uses it for two-factor authentication. So I don't know. I like this stuff. I like security. I think it's a smart way to protect your valuables. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've still not been convinced to use a thing like LastPass. I just can't see why that would be beneficial in any way.
Because when you're in, it's because of the browser plugins.
I guess, yeah. But I'm like, I know they're not the most secure passwords, but my passwords are just things that are memorable. Not related to me in any way. But
that's the other part of it. So with LastPass and NPass, they both have password generators in them. And then you basically set up like, I want at least 12 digits, random, it's going to have symbols in it. You could tell all these things. Mm-hmm. And so what the idea here is you start generating indecipherable or unmemorable, I can't even say that word, passwords you can't memorize. You start using those when you start create accounts. And that's what I started doing. So all my accounts now are just like really long things that I could never memorize. And you combine that with, but when I'm in my browser, I can just right click in a field. Sometimes with LastPass, it would even just auto log in. You can just pick, just for the site, just auto log me in. So if I've unlocked the system, if I unlocked LastPass, it'll just auto log you in. So,
yeah, but what happens if LastPass gets hacked?
But that's the point of using YubiKey.
Right, but not everybody has YubiKey.
Well, that's on you, though. Right? That's what I'm saying. Like, that's the security flaw with having, same with NPass. NPass can use Windows Hello as well, so you can use biometric authentication for it. It's not a two-factor, a 2FA approach, which is a little bit dangerous. But what's nice about NPass is the master list is encrypted and stored on your storage option of choice. You can use OneDrive, you can use Dropbox, you can use Box. You can store it there, so no one ever gets that file to hack. LastPass is a little bit more convenient, but it gets stored on LastPass's servers. It's still encrypted, so even if someone got it, they couldn't just open up your file. But it's potentially a little bit more vulnerable. But I would definitely recommend using LastPass. 2FA is a lot more important than with NPass, since you're always in control of the file yourself.
Do we know if Windows Hello, the facial recognition, has been fooled yet or tricked? Because as far as I'm aware, it hasn't. Well,
early on, they did have issues. I believe there were some twins that were able to kind of get by it. There was also this issue. It wasn't so much that it got hacked, but it was actually the reverse. With children, they would age, and it would actually throw it off. And so they've taken these things into consideration. I think they've improved it since then. So there's been improvements. But no, there really hasn't been too much, as far as I know, anyone hacking it. So
I mean, because what you could do, at least what Windows could do at some point, because I guess this could tie into the dynamic lock thing that we spoke about recently, which, by the way, if you don't know what dynamic lock is, Microsoft is working on a way for Windows Hello. I guess Windows Hello enabled devices. It might work with proximity devices as well, but it sees that you're at your PC or whatever. Then if you walk away from your PC, it'll be like, oh, you're no longer here. So I'm going to wait a minute. If you don't return, I will lock your device. So it's a security measure, which is nice. But you could also take that tech and go, oh, you're at your PC currently. Let's just log you into all of your services automatically. You won't need to worry about a password. If you're not at your PC, then all of your services will require a password, whatever else. Similar to the YubiKey, I guess, but would be much more convenient for me because I don't want a little device to mess with. I just want it to see me and just know who I am.
Yeah, I mean, this is always the issue with security, which is convenience versus being secure. And it's like it's
Two
a lot
factors
easier.
so insecure.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Windows Hello on the phone, for instance, in the iris scanner. People are like, PIN is faster. Like, yeah, when you use a 4-digit PIN, which is not secure, it is faster to use that. I agree. The point is, if you're going to use, like, say, on the Elite X3, you have iris scanning and fingerprint scanning built in. You can now make your PIN like 8 digits long, which is a lot more difficult to hack. And now it's a lot more secure. And sure, now all of a sudden, the Windows Hello system is now faster than PIN. And people laugh at me when I'm at the supermarket and I use, my card and I type in my PIN. I have a long PIN for my bank card. Most people just have a 4-digit one. I'm like, no, like how is 4 digits secure? Like that's one of those things you can kind of just eyeball someone using it and just like kind of memorize. So, you need to balance this stuff out, just like you said with LastPass. It's like, well, I just memorize all my passwords. Well, right. So the idea here is use passwords that you can't memorize, so everything becomes more secure. But yeah, this is where biometric stuff becomes a lot more, preferred, where you can just log in with a fingerprint or your face or something like that. It's a lot more secure. So.
We just need to live in a world in which nobody hacks anything.
Right.
Just everybody be nice and respect each other and each other's passwords.
Luckily, we have the Trump administration coming in, and they'll fix all hacking, apparently.
And with that, we should end.
Yes, I think we should. So there you go. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow me at Daniel_Rubino. It's RUB as in boy, INO. You can follow Zach at Zach Bowden, ZACBOWDEN on Twitter. You can ask us questions, follow us, whatever you want. If you want to join us on Fridays, we record us at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and then we follow up with questions which aren't recorded, but you guys can join in the chat that way. We're live. Otherwise, we post it a few days later, usually on Mondays, but there you go. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Leave us questions and comments and feedback. We'll talk to you later. Take care.